Hey, welcome back to another Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. I'm Ben Haupt, joined by my good friends David Ruffner, Jared Townley, for another conversation about Bitcoin and the Reformation. So, how are you guys these days? Jared, what's up with you?
So things are in the middle of the Christmas Advent season, which means you're in some point just trying to endure it and make it through and do all the things you need to do. We've had this will be our one, two, three, four, my fifth Christmas program for our school tonight. Being there, seeing the kids, tell who Jesus is, what he came here for. I mean, it's literally, I was in tears last night. There's a part in the program where this character on the train called the Christmas Express is like this businessman, and they tell him, hey, we're going to go do this story of Jesus. And he says, you don't actually believe that, do you? And all of the kids together, of course, in chorus say, yeah, we do. And it was just one of those, like, I immediately started weeping. Just thinking about it even makes me want to cry now, too.
Good.
Like, it's just the faith of children, right? I mean, that is one of the most beautiful things to see. So that is awesome. I'll tell you this story, too, about our son, Silas. So he's two and a half or so. I think this is appropriate language for our podcast. So his favorite word right now is the word butthole. Yes,
Great.
That
Great.
word.
Give that boy a microphone at the pageant.
And so he was introduced to this word by some kids in Zoe's class who were running around at like a post-school event saying this word. And so ever since then, it's like candy to this kid. And so we have tried every single thing we can to get him to stop, right? Silas, stop it. The firm thing. We've tried to quarantine the word. Fine. You want to say butthole, say it in the bathroom, right? So you can only say it in the bathroom. We've tried taking away his pennies, like from our little positive reinforcement jar. That doesn't work. The kid loves the word butthole right now. And so 2 days ago, twice during the day, once behind the couch and then once under the table, he was laying on the ground with his face towards the ground, going like this, butthole, 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 and just whispering butthole repeatedly as though he had to like get some sort of like quota out, or some like addict in a corner who is just out of control and needs to experience whatever it was. So, I mean, just like dying laughing at him while also trying not to like encourage him because it's hilarious, but like, kid, you gotta stop saying the word butthole. But anyway, just funny things like that are what make this crazy, busy, often time away from family and home a good, wonderful time of the year whenever you get those moments and those laughs with those that you love. So that's what's going on in my world. David, I'm gonna guess that you probably don't have those kind of problems with your kids.
Yeah, I have nothing to compare with that other than sort of the normal news here. Let's see. We're finishing up. We're on the last stretches of a renovation of our little mountain church up here. That's just been a delight. It's been all hands on deck.
Awesome.
It just looks marvelous. It's just great. So I'm excited about that. The college boys are done with classes today and tests, and we'll be home one tomorrow, one Monday. So we're excited to have them. Our resort town is struggling for snow. The weather is gorgeous as far as I'm concerned. I'm too busy this time of year to ski. And I still like to move every day, walk or hike. I'd say run or jog, but I try to avoid that. Have never enjoyed it. I pick it up every once in a while. So we're still moving, but it's hurting the ski hill. And in fact, our boys who are coming home then will be looking for hours with their mountain jobs, and they just might not be there until we get some snow. So we'll see. How about you, Ben? How are things in St. Louis?
Things are not nearly as entertaining as they are Jared's way, that's
Right.
for sure. Jared, you haven't had any challenges on the Sunday morning as you're leading God's people through liturgy, and he's using that word in church, is he?
No, but I think that would be absolutely hilarious. I would even welcome such an experience because it would just be a delight to laugh about
Especially
afterwards.
like at the time of silence, right after people have confessed their sins and they're just reflecting, self-reflection time. That would be man, if I could kind of coach him along, that would be classic.
That's right. Now, Silas, yell it out really loud.
Right now. Oh man, so good.
You need to, Jared, you get that memo app out on your iPhone or whatever. You got to record that a little bit and then tuck it away somewhere, but have fun with it.
Yeah, we ran for a while just a list of funny things that the kids said, and we go back to that every once in a while, and it's just a delight. No, things are pretty boring our way as well, very similar to David. In fact, we also, our oldest is finishing up the semester today as well, same place that David's is, and we'll be home Sunday, so we're excited for that. And we'll just excited for some downtime. Last week, we had everybody on the PLI staff here in town in St. Louis, and it was literally people from Tanzania, Africa, and from Portugal,
Wow.
as well as people from the east to west coast, from north, like Minneapolis area, all the way south to Georgetown is where Jerry Kieschnick is from. So yeah, just a lot of fun to have everybody together, and yeah, they're finishing out the year. And so lots of great stuff there. I'm starting to get more involved at our local congregation with some potential changes in leadership. So a call coming that will be announced, and we'll see what happens. But the little church that we go to, that's part of a bigger church, but the congregation where we go to on Sunday after Sunday, probably be a leadership change in the next 6 weeks or so. So taking on a little more responsibility, and I'm actually really enjoying getting back into, it's weird being a pastor, but never practicing anything on Sunday morning. And so getting back into that a little bit is actually been a lot of fun. So good. Well, we're going to throw it to David for the lead off of our conversation today. So David, take it away.
All right. So I've got three quotes to talk about. They all lived at different times. I don't know that there was even any overlap. There probably was in the first two, but Nikola Tesla is the first one, Henry Ford, and then I suppose building certainly on the Tesla legacy is one Elon Musk. And our topic at hand today is energy, and even more forward, the strange idea, first time I heard it, incredibly strange to me, of energy money or energy backed money. First of all, any descriptor to money other than just money is probably strange to us, and yet money is so ordinary but not reflected upon much either, right? So this kind of goes back to other ideas like, the one fish asking the other fish, how do you feel about being wet all the time, and the other fish is like, what are you talking about wet? What's this wet stuff you're talking about? Because it's just the water they swim in all day long. We are so used to our money. Our lifespans are relatively short, most of us shorter than the US dollar. So we just assume this always was. I'll build on that just a little bit more. I was talking with somebody else recently. I don't know if you've heard this before. America has been called the American experiment over and over. An experiment in self-rule, right? Well, if this is an experiment, guess what else is an experiment? Our money is an experiment, right? If the whole endeavor is an experiment, then its component parts may well be then also. So we're reflecting on money today, not just the US dollar, but an idea of energy money. So three quotes for you, and I don't know how, maybe it'll be somewhat rapid fire, but first of all, Nikola Tesla once said this, and I'm amazed at this. It sounds a little bit woo-woo now, but he said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy. And then these next two are the woo-woo ones, frequency and vibration. All right? Now, he was a physicist, right? He actually literally means this. When he says frequency and vibration, I don't think he's suddenly soaking crystals and going new age on us here. Although maybe he was. Maybe somebody can correct me on that. But he was the mad scientist, right? He I think he had a lab, what was it, near Colorado Springs, somewhere up in the mountains in Colorado. Had a pretty wild lab. There have been a few movies written about it. But he did experiments with electricity at a time when the understanding of electricity was coming into its own. And shortly thereafter, we're looking down into the atom, and what do we find there? Energy, frequency, vibration. We find all of these things. So that was the first one. Building on that, going to Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford, we're talking 1920 and 21. A couple of quotes from him. He's quoted in a newspaper from Chicago. The second quote, the first one was from an old newspaper in Dearborn, Michigan at the time. He says this, the first quote: "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." So his posture to begin with, this is 1921. This is before the great financial crisis, soon to come in a few more years. This is after though, this is hugely important. This is after 1913, which was the charter of a central bank in America. That central bank being the Federal Reserve. And think about that. I think that the span of time, am I right about this? I think I'm right about this. The span of time from the charter of the Federal Reserve, though, 1913 till now, is a shorter amount of time than the USA had without it. Right? Again, we have in our midst the Federal Reserve, a system that we think of as crucial to the United States, as integral, as foundational, and yet it's a new experiment within this American experiment. Henry Ford was not a fan. Other people are not fans. So you might know that about Ron Paul and the like. Somebody pointed this out once. Coincidence? That's a coincidence question mark. But 1913 is the Federal Reserve. And what do we have shortly thereafter? A world war. Eventually, we call that World War I because it was succeeded by a second World War. And while we can have assassinations of, folks in Europe, princes and the like, and we can say that was the catalyst for it, we know now that a huge catalyst for both of those world wars was money woes of different nations. We can see that if we as an individual have a money woe big enough, we might consider crime, small crime at first, gradually getting bigger, right, as a solve for our money woes. So anyways, he's looking at the banking system. He says if Americans knew anything about it, he believes there'd be revolution by tomorrow. I'll keep going. He said the cure for the evils of money will be found when we measure wealth by units of energy. Under such a system, the token of exchange would be a unit of power, say a kilowatt hour instead of a dollar. The unit of energy, and here's the thing, he said this, can never be monopolized. That actually goes back to Tesla. Tesla believed there'd become a time where, just as we were telling our kids this, we were showing them, the iPhone, we're telling them about my first mobile phone. It was when I was at seminary. I had one, Megan did not. It was so that I could call her more cheaply than the plan on campus. Even then, I had to call after 9 o'clock at night to get the cheaper minutes to call her. And then, the big one that blew their mind is that I had to pull out the top of the cell phone, the antenna. I had to slide the antenna out. And they're like, that's just crazy. That's crazy. Antennae. But at the same time, antennae are everywhere. They've just been integrated. They've been sort of disintermediated away. But antennae catch signals. Tesla looked at the universe around us and said, there's energy everywhere. He believed in the future we'd have sort of dishes, receptors, antennae to just harness out of the air electricity. And who knows, maybe that will come. It's not far off. I have a cell phone here on my desk charging in a dock where it just rests on the dock. It doesn't plug in anymore, right? We've got kind of NFC charging there. And so Ford is thinking about this as well. He's thinking about money not as a dollar, but now as an energy unit. And it can't be monopolized because it's everywhere. Now, even if energy is everywhere, we still have to harness it, right? So that harnessing of energy is the real question here. One more from Ford, and then I think I'll come up from air and listen from the two of you for just a bit here. The only way to stop the money trust is to establish a monetary system based on actual production. Give us an energy standard instead of the gold standard. Now, I will say this. Living on a pure fiat standard, the gold standard sounds good, and yet the gold standard was in trouble even before it was temporarily, 50 some years ago, suspended. 54 years ago, I think it was, 1971. Temporarily suspended by Nixon, I believe. Temporary. The gold standard was better than no standard, but even the gold standard was being papered over. And the idea there is it's hard to do kind of constant audits of gold. It's heavy. You get enough gold in one place, and now you have to have a secure vault. Yeah, it's hard to transport. Once you've transported and done all of that, it's hard, timely, and costly to say it, to prove that it's real gold and not fool's gold or gold-plated tungsten or something like that. So for all these reasons, even the gold standard, even though that sounds good to me now, it was not perfect whatsoever. And so Henry Ford is saying two things here. The current monetary system we have, in his view, is disgusting. He's joining Tesla and saying, if you want to produce anything in the world, at its core is energy, the harnessing of energy, the focusing of energy. And it would be good to have a monetary system based on this thing as opposed to something that can be faked. I'll come up for air. What do you guys think so far?
I'm just surprised that he said that about the gold standard, like fiat currency, because at least I think some people today would say, well, that was the good times, right? Now it's just whoever wants whatever, and you print money with a click of a button, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just amazing to hear that he thought that even was bad. So it's one of those, I'm sure if he thought that was bad, then he would just immediately probably fall to the ground and die from how horrible things are today from the current system. But it's also just amazing to hear that this feeling and this sense of like distrust or the centralization of our money and how it works has been something that people have not desired or not found acceptable for a very long time, right? And not as a collective maybe, but that there's been individual people for a long time that have always felt a certain amount of like, this is not how it should be, or this isn't right, which is just so intriguing because I think we're so limited to like our perspective that sometimes we forget there are people that came before us. And so, I mean, I think of our episode, I think, Ben, when you talked about all of the things that led to Bitcoin, right? That it's easy to think that it's just this thing novel completely, but there are so many technological updates over time that contributed to, that became part of what Bitcoin is today. And so when you hear, hey, this guy who lived almost, 100 years ago thought that the system was broken then, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe the problem is either always going to be here, or maybe we actually really have stumbled upon something that could help answer maybe call it age-old question or an age-old problem of money. And that's just incredibly curious, but also incredibly like hope-bringing that, hey, people have long thought about this and long wrestled with it. And in some ways, I think we're here because we think this is the solution, at least the best one that currently exists.
That's really good. As I'm thinking about gold versus Bitcoin, because that's kind of our gold versus some kind of energy-based monetary system, it reminded me of some posts that I saw on X recently that kind of tied China's current monetary approach to gold and heavy metals. So there's a big thing about silver and how much silver China has. Same with gold. And this post was saying that meanwhile, America is pursuing this much more technological approach to money and talking about a Bitcoin standard and some of these kinds of things. And the post, I don't know if it was this post or another one, just went on to talk about how there have been some real shifts in how the left and right have thought about technology. So in the 20th century, the left was very interested in centralized technology. So like factories were a big thing for socialists and supporting workers' rights and that sort of thing. Very socialized approach. And now with the advent of the iPhone and Bitcoin and all these new technologies, the personal computer technology has become decentralized, and so the right has kind of grabbed a hold of it, and it's just fascinating, these age-old battles, but some new kind of takes on the old battles back and forth. I love that, this idea of energy money is not a brand new concept, certainly was not invented in 2008. The other thing that comes to mind is just a physics principle. And I had to, I'm no physics major, I'm no scientist, but I had to quick make sure that I wasn't making stuff up. But according to the law of conservation of energy, there is
Yep.
no such thing as creation of new energy. It exists. It can be transformed from one state potential to kinetic and all this kind of stuff, but you can't create energy out of nothing. It takes inputs, and I think as Christians, and I don't want to steal your thunder, David, but what's really important is to say there is this stuff in the universe, and energy is part of that stuff of the universe, and humans do not have the power to create energy out of nothing with no inputs. That's not something that humans can do. And so that is an interesting constraining factor to tying money to energy, is that you can't create it out of thin air.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to pick a slight tangent from that, and we're going to really majorly come back to that. But think of energy versus the federal bank, like the Federal Reserve and a central bank is what I mean to say. One is pre-political and the other is utterly political, right? The United States can harness electricity, they can store electricity, they can squander it, they can quote unquote produce it, which is back to our harness word and related to what you were saying, Ben. But there is no such thing as U.S. electricity. There is no such thing as Russian electricity. And actually, that is a quality that gold shares. There is no such thing as United States gold. I'm certain that probably that our bricks are formed, and there might be some sort of U.S. monikered stamp embossed in the top of that, but that's not essential to its being gold by any means. So gold are pre-political. We even had a conversation long ago where we talked about other pre-political institutions, like marriage. Marriage used to be a pre-political institution, that we had laws that recognized it and supported it. None of those laws presumed to create marriage or be the genesis of marriage. And now, since 2015 on in the United States, we've turned even marriage into a very political beast. So we've always got this tendency of sinful humans to want things in our own likeness and our own image from our own hands. But back to, and by the way, Henry Ford and Nikola Tesla and Elon Musk, who we've yet to come to, all wildly eccentric characters. Wildly eccentric. Wildly so. But kind of don't discount them. There was an old Mel Gibson movie like that where he was kind of a nutter in New York City. I'm trying to remember that. With anyways, I'll remember the movie later. I recommend the movie. He is a madman, and yet by the end of the movie, you realize he's a bit more sane than so many people around him. Conspiracy, I think, was the name of the movie. But
with
conspiracy
Mad
theory. Anyways, say that again.
I thought you were going with Mad Max. That's a Mel Gibson
Well,
movie,
not that. No, yeah.
Payback.
And Mel himself has been a little mad here and there. So they're eccentric, and yet they're maybe onto something. Can we allow somebody to be eccentric and yet test their ideas here? And when it comes to energy, and this is where you were going, Ben, and where we are going to eventually go here shortly, it deals with the created world as it is. It recognizes it. It receives it. It channels it. It says, I'm not free to create more of it. I'm not even really free to create some sort of alternative. I'd be a dummy to think that I can somehow create something better than what the Lord has created in this case. but I am free to receive it and channel it such that the fruits of the labor to do so are in some sense greater than the sum of the parts, right? So it's toil to collect seeds, it's toil to plant them, it's toil to water and weed, but the fruits at the end of it, the harvest of, kind of taking our toil, our imagination, and working alongside of God's creation can be very fruitful. And that is very different than somehow saying no thank you to this created order. I've got something better. I've got a better idea. That would be hubris. That would be truly hubris. All right, I'm going to go on to the Elon Musk one much more recently. Now we jump to 2025, both of these quotes. The first one, even more contemporary, October 14th of this year, so just 2 months ago, he said he was responding to somebody on X, but he said this greater conversation. This is why Bitcoin is based on energy. You can issue fake fiat currency, and every government in history has done so, but it is impossible to fake energy. Boy, that's like 2 sentences that sum up our conversation thus far. Am I right? Anybody?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't. There is no way to get a Bitcoin without going through the protocol, and there is a mechanism. No one has figured out how to fraudulently create coin, and part of it is, even if you would, Bitcoin is a bit of a closed system. It recognizes all of the inputs and outputs, and so it wouldn't recognize a fraudulent thing anyhow. Yeah, you can't defraud the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, and the input is sacrifice of some money up front for some computers, as well as some money up front for the electricity. If the reward's greater than the inputs, then it keeps churning on, and it has continued to churn on. Jared, you were going to say.
Yeah, so even the way in which you spend and send like real Bitcoin involves energy in the sense of fees, right? So if you're sending Bitcoin on the actual network, not like on Coinbase to another Coinbase. Now, we're not talking about ETFs. We're talking about your cold storage, hardware wallet, type in your address, hit send, all those sort of things. 2 things happen when you do that. First, what you're doing is you're sending the whole thing, your whole UTXO, your whole unspent transaction output. And so if you're sending 1 Bitcoin, but you're going to send maybe half to David and half to Ben, you're feeling extra generous, sending them like $45,000 today. So congratulations. And so you send half to David, half to Ben, but then, you changed your mind. You want 0.1 back for yourself. So you're only going to send whatever that would be, 0.45, and then you want 0.1 left. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to send all of that 1, and then 0.45 is going to go to Ben, 0.45 is going to go to David, but then 0.1 will be sent back to you. And so it's not even like you can't just send some of your unspent transaction output. You have to send the whole thing. But then a part of that also has to be a fee to use the network itself. And so there was a time, I think, a long time, way before I was in Bitcoin, where the network fees were below 1, I think. I don't know. I'm pretty sure there was a time when you didn't have to spend anything to use the network because blocks, again, the Bitcoin blocks that are mined didn't have enough to fill them. And so they were using, and people were able to send transactions for nothing. But nowadays, it still costs actual energy, real Bitcoin, to send a transaction, to have it validated on the network. And so even in the actual use of Bitcoin, yet alone the creation and the mining of it, there is energy that must be spent and used to participate and to partake in what it is and how it works.
And to continue that thread, that it costs money to mine, and that even these transactions cost. I mean, it doesn't just cost a little bit. Like I just personal experience here. I really was interested. I got a nice card, a graphic processing unit, beefed up my computer, wanted to see if there were any cryptocurrencies out there that I could still mine. There's almost nothing that you can mine from home anymore. There are these ASICs that are built specifically for mining. They're, if you want to have the best one, the most efficient one these days to really compete, you're probably in at a couple, maybe $1,000 or more. You have to run a 220 line because it doesn't even run on 110 regular juice that you get just from a regular plug. And then even at that, you got to pay your electric bill, and that baby's gonna, it's like, in Chevy Chase when he puts the lights up on the house, the nuclear alarm is going off. Bitcoin takes a ton of power because there's so many people trying to mine a block. So it's not just a little bit of input, it's a significant amount of power now that it takes for one person to plug into the network. And I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way, but it's a real cost, and it's a big cost. We're not talking about pennies.
I'm moving beyond physics here to more the whole of life, but look at any valuable realm of your life, and it requires energy of you. You want to have a bad weekend? Spend it with your wife and don't put anything into it, right? Same with your kids. I'm laughing out at Jared and Emily with their little one, all the energy they've been putting in there. Just try it. You want to. In fact, how is this a great recipe to be disenchanted with your church? Get a critique of it, and then away with your critique and quit investing in that place. And that's all overly simplistic, but it's not untrue that kind of heat death is coming in that case. So all the valuable areas of in your life require real inputs. And you're blessed to have that life and energy, and you're blessed to give those inputs and other people input as well. You're not doing it on your own. There's some analog there with, well, we already did an analog with the seed in the ground growing into the plant that bears fruit. Henry Ford, Tesla, Musk, many others now have suggested that our money is the safest when it's of a similar species to these others. And why would it be the safest in that regard? Because it recognizes the world as it is. It receives the world as it is as gifts, but realizes that we're also blessed not just to receive the raw goods, but to, again, channel, focus, reinvest those streams, and that the fruits that can come from it are greater than the initial inputs. That's part of it, what it is to be a creature in this world. Let's shift, if we can, to the alternative. What's the alternative, gentlemen? If our money is not backed by energy, and by the way, gold was a species of that. I know, back to that quote from Henry Ford, he was critical of gold, but gold was a species of that. Gold represented that. You couldn't have money back if your money was backed by gold. The gold evidently, to all eyes, is backed by the hard work that it took to find it and secure it and purify it and now store it. So even gold was kind of a species of energy money, even though it has its own issues. But what's the real alternative? If our money's not backed by something, what's taking place?
Well, what does it say, right? By the faith and trust, or backed by the United States government, right? And so I think our temptation would be to say, oh, well, it's backed by nothing, right? It's imaginary, it's fake. And in some ways it is, right? Because it's the whole, they can just make more, or as Jack Mallers is apt to say, right? Don't work for something someone else can just print and create. And yet at the same time, it is backed by the institution, right? And so, you people, I think, are going to think, oh, well, what about the FDIC, right? Can't they back my bank so that it's safe? They can make more money if that goes down. I think some people would point to say, well, isn't it backed by the military, right? So it's the whole, if you don't like our system, then we'll use either our money or our weapons to make sure that you will follow what we want, what we say. But at the end of the day, all of those are in some ways far inferior than if it was backed by something like true, real, uncreatable, undestroyable energy. Because all of those, as we've talked about, involve a human element, right? And so I'm thinking of like Friedrich Hayek that we've talked about here, and his talks about intervention with systems and how it's just impossible for humans to understand how you kick that rock, but then it's going to set off all of these other chain reactions down the road that you just can't even see. But then I also think about the need to feel in control, and to feel like I can do it, or I can make it, or I can create it, which is like a God-given right. I mean, that's the sort of, hey, we're made in the image of the Creator to create things. But there comes a time and point at which we say, well, I can't create that, right? I can't create this, that my limitations as a creature under that Creator only go so far. And so in some ways, what is the alternative? Well, it's something that we have to point the arrow at. It's backed by something, but then we need to reassure ourselves that it's a good enough backing, and that it's going to actually be backed by that. But there's also all these obscure, like, hey, well, we have to actually trust the people who are doing the backing, and that they're going to do it well and not take advantage of us. I mean, there's so many, it adds a lot of layers that in some ways you think, you say, hey, there's no way we could do this well. There's no way we're going to get this right because of all the things that have to be put into it. That in some ideal world, maybe. But us being skeptical of humans and their nature, we'd say probably not.
So good. Totally agree. Keep going.
I was going to say, you were talking about us creating. Let's talk about what's the difference between us creating and God creating, because the verb, to create, or that we are creative beings, is applied to both us and God, and yet I think there's some huge distinctions. So let's talk about that.
I mean, I think it's the difference between being creative and creating. So being creative is taking stuff, right? Paint or clay or some kind of ideas, but it's taking stuff that's out there. Maybe it's even just ideas that you've collected over time, but especially creating in the kind of physical, tangible world, take stuff, you change it around, you put your mark on it, and there's something good to be said about this. This is part of being human, and it's part of what's beautiful about being human, is that we do get to be creative, and God puts all kinds of stuff in our hands, but it's very, very different from one who I was going to use the word legend, but it's much more than a legend. It's right. It's a true legend. It's a true story that there is one who exists who just spoke words, and when those words were spoken, stuff appeared. That's not creativity. That's creating out of nothing.
Yeah, ex nihilo is the language there, out of nothing. Jared, you were going to add something more, or no?
That's a great distinction. I think the closest thing people would say, I feel like I created something, is when they have children, right? But even that, you're using sperm and egg that in some ways have always existed or were made, at a time as well. And so that's even a creative sort of action, which, I guess none of our kids might like to hear that, but that's also, I think, a very, very interesting perspective.
Yeah. So God creates all things out of nothing. We are free in a much smaller sphere to create some things out of some things, some other things. But we're neither free to create all things out of nothing. Try it. Maybe you do. How's it going? But nor are we able to create some things out of nothing. you know, does the out of nothing work. We just don't do work out of nothing very well, right? If we're creating something out of nothing, I mean, the closest approximation I can come to that is when my kids were real young and they played make believe. I mean, they had a rich world out of nothing, right? But eventually, some combination of them growing up out of it or adults saying, it's time to put childish ways aside, right? And we are free now to create some things out of some other things for the care of our neighbor. But this ex nihilo work is God's work. And here's where we come to the proposition I want to put forth. Not the only person to have said it. I think this is the first time we're saying it as forcefully as we are here. But fiat money, the idea that money now can be created out of nothing is arrogant. It is full of hubris. It is, I would say, fictitious thinking on the one hand, and yet fictitious thinking can get people harmed, and it does harm people. And the bad thing about like sin, this, you know, the hubris and sin when we carry it forth is eventually somebody gets harmed. Eventually somebody does. Maybe not for a while, but eventually somebody does. We're lucky if it's only, the harm is only to ourselves, right? The author of that particular sin. But more often than that, sin hurts a variety of people. In fact, it might strike other people before it strikes us, right? And in that way, well, what do we say? Pride goes before the fall. Pride goes before the fall. And I think we would say this about fiat money. I know I would. I'll let you guys speak for yourselves. Fiat money as a species of money is that it once started anchored, rooted in the actual received world, right? Backed by gold. Then we went to a hybrid system. Then in 1971, we temporarily suspended that 54 years ago. Now we're on an entirely fiat system, and I don't think it's going well for us. Somebody else might argue with that and say, it's going just fine for me, at which point I'd say, well, I probably make a poor profit, but I will prophesy this. Given enough time, it won't go well for us, and it won't go well for all. Because somebody is attempting to create value out of nothing, which means somebody down the line is getting harmed, somebody is being stolen from, and it's a rotten way to go about business. The farmer doesn't have that luxury to create out of nothing. Jared, you just said it yourself. Mom and dad don't have the ability to create out of nothing. People who work with their hands don't have the ability to create out of nothing. Most every vocation doesn't work that way. What makes it acceptable suddenly, morally or even technically, what makes it acceptable for a central bank suddenly now to create something out of nothing?
And I think that this gets to the core of what happens in the Garden of Eden. You know, so the thing that we always talk about, right? Adam and Eve fell into sin, and what is sin? And so you could use a lot of different definitions, whether you talk about turning away from God, whether you talk about turning in on yourself, whether it's not doing what God wants, etc., etc. But another way that I think fits with our conversation that we would talk about, sin is just a desire to be God, not to be like God, but to be God yourself, right? To make the world a certain way, to create out of nothing, to determine who lives and who dies, what is right, what is wrong. All of these things are that I think I know better, I can do better than a ruler, than our creator, than the Father, all of those sort of things. And so when we think about fiat in this way, then what is it but this lived out in a monetary sense of the word? Like, we don't need to be restrained or constrained by any sort of natural things of energy. We can just do whatever we want. We think we know best. We put these 8 people or 10 people in a room, and we trust them to put their big brains together and make the best decision for what is, because, you know, we don't need anyone else, any natural constraints to tell us what is or isn't. And so it's a weird thing to think about, to say that our money is like a sinful system or like a broken system in that sense. But when you frame it in that lens of, hey, fiat in the sense of just made by decree, right? Just we think there are this many now, is the same desire of anyone who wants to be God. It's the I want to go out in my backyard and make my tree a money tree, right? I wish I could just go into my bank account and add a couple of zeros on there. That'd be great, right? We all wish for those things, but in some of us have the ability to actually do that, and some of us don't. But all of us have that desire, I think, to be God, to be in control. And so when we see it in our money, it's like, this is not how it should be. This is not right. It's not the way God made the world to run, even. I think we could say it that way. And so there has to be something else. There has to be a better way than what is currently.
Yeah, the way I maybe would come at it from, or I'll just kind of a thought experiment I'll try from a little bit different perspective. Let's say that as you're listening to this, you're thinking, I'm not sure that I'm 100% bought in that fiat is just utterly sinful. But so let's say that governments are free to create a dollar, and I mean in a lot of ways, just like on the human level, it's true, governments can kind of do whatever they want to do, provided that they have one thing, and it's that they have force, right? So they have, when I got into Bitcoin, one of the big questions that I had for Bitcoin is who's going to enforce the value of the network, because Bitcoin doesn't have tanks or B-2 bombers or anything like that. But the longer I get that I've been with Bitcoin, the more I think, well, that's kind of exactly the point. There's this whole thesis of soft war, and Jason Lowery has written a lot on this, but coin has the potential to allow value creation without it needing to be enforced by guns. And any kind of monetary system that is created by a government is worth anything because, I mean, frankly, the US dollar is worth stuff because we won the wars. And we had the force to be able to force the countries that lost the wars to buy our dollars, to use our dollars. So every system, value system, is dirty at some point, right? But the thing that is true about Bitcoin is that it took real stuff to create those Bitcoin, and people had to pay for something besides the Bitcoin. And as they did that, the price of Bitcoin starts going up because it costs real electricity, and the more electricity that takes and that gets pumped into the system, the more dollars or whatever kind of value. I don't have a power plant in my own backyard, so you have to buy that power from somebody else. So I just think that if you step back and start to look at how is value defended and why is something of value, you get pretty quickly to the point where fiat doesn't seem like the neutral kind of just dollar bills in the wallet that I think we all thought of it as growing up.
Yeah, think of the days to come. Gifts will be given, right? Value is going to be conveyed in our own homes. It's going to have been on account of sacrifice, right? Work and sacrifice. Even the gifts under the tree are stored energy, you could say, conveyed energy. I wish there are some extra things I could put under the tree for my family that I can't. But within the constraints of what I have, and the fruitfulness that we have, we give these things, and that's actually what gives them their worth, right? Having settled.
Well, and I think like there's a sense in which it's this idea of what is true freedom. I mean, I feel like we're sort of skipping on the top of this. Like, true freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, right? It's not the ability to live, eat, drink tomorrow, be merry, we die sort of thing. True freedom is found in the sort of boundaries of life, right? That as Paul, right, who says you've been free, but now we're freed and we're slaves to Christ, right? That we are people who live under him as subjects in his kingdom, in his rule and reign in the world, and we live in the ways in which he tells us to live, and loving our enemies, praying for those who persecute us, loving the poor, the homeless, the refugee, the widow, stuff like that. And so in the sense of fiat as wanting to be freed, we could say, hey, that's not what true freedom is. But a money that would truly be free would actually be bound by the constraints of nature, of energy, of the world as it has been made. And that, as much as that might feel like, oh, but then what do we do when we have a war that we need to go fund? What do we do when we need to fund this program, whatever it is? Well, you have to work within the constraints. And it causes, like you said, David, in some ways it makes things more valuable, because then I actually think this thing is good. I actually think this thing is worthy of pursuing, even in our system where we're not allowed to do whatever we want, and we have to make real choices between what to spend, what to save, what to not do. And so it's this idea of where is real freedom found, and how does that even help us understand how Bitcoin creates a better system to live within, because there are bounds. And even us, as we live in the Bitcoin system, we still have those bounds, right? I mean, it's the whole buy, save, spend your Bitcoin, and it's a very interesting thing. We're not going to go there today, but it's very interesting hearing some of the stuff from MicroStrategy about like the situations in which they would actually sell their Bitcoin. And these are the people that the guy used to say, never sell your Bitcoins. And yet they have to live within the constraints of, well, we might need to actually do this because we can't just do anything we want. It's not that type of system. And so I think there's real value found in hey, here's your freedom, but here's the boundaries within that freedom of what you live and how you're able to function within it.
That's wonderful. Well, hopefully we've offered some hearers a chance to reflect again on what would be different. What are the distinctions between our fiat money, which in itself says, what is money? What is this money that has been so natural and native to me? What's really happening there? Is there an alternative? Yes, there have been many proposed alternatives, both hypothetical in the future. That's what Henry Ford was dreaming about. And now Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he, she, or they were, has offered to us something along those lines. There's many people who say, yes, this is it, a better tool, more dishonest. Some language around that, they often call it proof of work. It's a proof of work monetary system. There's no faking it. But I'd maybe even add like a little phrase before that. It's an actively receptive proof of work monetary system. It receives the world as it is and works with it. And if somebody can point out in our logic or the logic of Bitcoin, sort of the philosophy around Bitcoin, where the hubris of attempting to create ex nihilo, something God does very well, but we are suggesting we do very poorly. It's always a fictitious activity. It's always an activity when attempted to be carried out, people are hurt by it. That's what we would say, or I would say. Somebody can point out to where Bitcoin also falls to that, I'd be ready to hear it. So maybe that'd be a great listener comment or reach out, or you say, I want to come on your show and be angry and tell you how you're wrong. Let's have that conversation. Having said all that, we're kind of positing distinctions between fiat money and Bitcoin. I just want to push just a little bit further with this proof of work, and maybe even as a closing thought, that here we are, we're in Advent. Christmas is just right around the corner. By the time this airs, it might well be Christmas. In Christmas, God sends his son, takes on flesh. He shall be named Jesus, for he will save God's people from their sins. And he does save us from our sins. And even God saving his creation by coming into the creation, even he does it now himself by work, by the proof of work, by the very giving up of his body and blood, going into death, breaking out of death for us. Our salvation, we could say also, is a proof of work salvation, which is a wonderful thing to kind of meditate on at this time of year. God, who created the world out of nothing, now saves the world through a someone, and his name is Jesus, and he is here certainly for his church, but he's here for all, that all might also receive him and become a part of that body. So that's, I know, our hope. That's the hope of little boys who yell butthole, butthole, butthole. That is their faith, their hope, their parents, their extended families, the hope of the world. So our small h hope at this time is that we can get you to consider money and consider Bitcoin. Our large H hope, the hope for all the world, is certainly God's Christ, who he sends to us, who works in our behalf, going down into death, breaking through it, and now opening, as you said, Jared, God's kingdom to us again. And it is a kingdom of peace and forgiveness and life and salvation. So with that, I guess I'm not exactly sure when this is going to pop out, but Merry Christmas, Jared and Ben, and we hope that this has been a good episode.